Yeah, please.
So I have a really brief statement and then a question. I managed to wrangle attend a meeting yesterday with Minister Howell in the Account Centre in Kilkenny. He did, tried his best to get a meeting, or to get time to come here to speak, but he sent his apologies. And then my question is, I suppose in more of an Irish context, corruption can kind of usually forms out of social circles, and politicians and big business kind of do socialise in the same circles. So at what stage does social capital become corruption?
I'm not actually, to be honest, I'm not sure what you mean by
social.
So,
I mean, so friend of a friend, or you're doing a friend a favour because you're doing a social group, or that's the capital of your social standing. At what stage does that become corruption?
But I should have said at the outset when I was talking about corruption in Ireland that we can categorise corruption in Ireland as it manifests itself, or as I see it manifesting itself in three categories. First, petty. And I said earlier that we haven't really suffered from petty corruption in a long time, largely because of our professionalisation of the civil service and so on, and because of relative levels of economic welfare. Civil servants, generally speaking, well paid enough. They don't have to extract rents and bribes from ordinary citizens. The second one is grand corruption, and we saw through the tribunals that we have had a history of grand corruption. Senior civil servants or senior politicians taking money or abusing their power to some degree. The third, which I didn't talk about, which touches on your question, is legal corruption or lawful corruption. And I spoke earlier about how Ireland is ranked relatively high on the Corruption Perceptions Index, but I didn't say the Corruption Perceptions Index only measures one type of corruption, or corruption as is understood by legislators, which is the abuse of power, the criminal abuse of power, generally speaking, for private gain, and involves bribe taking, money laundering, embezzlement, and so on. Legal corruption involves the abuse of social capital to a large degree. It involves abuses that are not outlawed in legislation, and it can involve the trade in influence, trafficking in influence, which is what regulation of lobbying is meant to address. Now, I've said before that I don't think that the lobbying regulations go far enough to address this risk. For example, they don't allow us to see how much money is being paid to consultant lobbyists who are. It doesn't tell us it doesn't tell us much about the financial interests of those lobbying and those on whose behalf they're lobbying. We have had a history where politicians and business people have been too close together. We haven't addressed, for example, the abuse of revolving doors, the movement of civil servants and politicians into the private sector. And this has created, you might say, negative social capital that has led to failure to a large degree to regulate our private sector effectively. We had people moving from regulatory agencies into banks and back again. We had regulators who were very close to senior bank executives and who failed or refused to effectively regulate our banks to catastrophic consequences. So, to answer your question, we have suffered from an abuse of social capital, and I don't think we've gone far enough to address those abuses.
I think maybe you guys might have some kind of info on this, because you were talking about group thinking about how dangerous that can be.
Yeah, I think some of the work we've done together on Leaks tries to look at that. And I think this is the kind of area where activity by groups and transparency is so important. We did a study comparing cabinets in Ireland and the UK and where they came from, which schools, and there is quite a clustering of schools. I don't think our research really breaks the news on that. Okay, we actually, it was more a methodological paper we were interested. We devised a particular measure which isn't important here. But what is important is that it is undoubtedly the case that there is significant clustering from kind of age 12 of those with power in our societies. And this varies between societies, so we can make it better and we can make it worse. We need monitoring of it. One of the reasons that we did cabinets was partly because John's a political scientist and he tells me what to do a lot of the time, but it was also because the information was there. It was very easy to get information on where most politicians went to school from age, dot really, which I think is a good thing about politicians. I have tried to do it, for instance, on entrepreneurs. Ernst & Young hold a very good competition on entrepreneurs of the year in different countries. Trying to find out where such people go to school is extraordinarily difficult and speaks to the fact that in some areas of our society, power and how it arises is very opaque. And I think we need to shine light on that, and we need more information on that. I would also say, I think your question was very well put. How does social capital turn negative? We know social capital can be extraordinarily useful. We know in lending to poor communities, for instance, there's organisations like Kiva that have used the idea of social capital in order to provide financial services to small communities. And we shouldn't be all negative about social capital. LinkedIn, for instance, makes a fortune out of building social networks. Is this a valueless thing? No. But the trafficking in influence is definitely problematic. The unfair access, the idea that all politicians would be clustered, or most politicians would be clustered in schools from age 11 is very, very disturbing. So it's more the need to shine a light on this and to investigate it and to think about it than to declare it all to be negative that I would be concerned with. Is that a fair representation of where we're at?
And like when you take it up to the next level, to the university level, the clustering gets even more concentrated. So if you think in England Eton is bad, well, it's got nothing in Oxbridge for government ministers. And we have a similar problem here with the university I won't mention, but there's a real clustering, and the connections are fine, but like Brendan was also saying then, if you know that all these ministers come from this school, doesn't tell you what businessmen come from the exact same school and they were all in the same volleyball club or football club or rowing club together. So those connections the connections are fine themselves, but to know about them and actually find out about them is very difficult. And then, like you said, could they be used, bringing up your friends saying, you remember years ago when we were in that same club together, buddy, can you help me out in this situation?
Just a little anecdote, and I would caution that this is not an attack on the individuals concerned at all, okay? It's just a tale from the field, if you like. I was messing around with my internet one night and looking at the Entrepreneur of the Year awards in Ireland, and I find it really hard to get information on the businessmen. People have private lives, and I suppose they want to protect them. They have stories for their business to tell, and sometimes being an entrepreneur, it's very important to pretend that you fashioned yourself from the age of 1, so very often you don't want to admit your social capital. But I came across a wonderful photo of 2 winners in a private college, a fee-paying exclusive college, and along with them at age, it must have been, I think it was about 5th year, so what age would they, 16, 17? It was a picture of them and the minister who presented them with their awards. Okay. Now, I'm not suggesting anything nasty about those individuals, okay, or anything nasty about that process, but where we're told that the job creators must be respected and are self-made, I think we've a problem with getting information on that. There's a balance, obviously, to be struck between privacy for people, which they're generally entitled to, but also a social accountability in terms of watching that, danger of closed and golden circles.